My warmest thanks for your participation, your questions. It's been so useful. Then I would like to perhaps draw a few elements of this week. You remember we started this week on Monday with a session on the concepts about inequalities, and then an introduction of the European Union INPA reference document that is posted in your resources on the webpage that you can find on HowSpace about this inequality week. And then we had a number of thematic sessions. I would like to recall you that we have 4 guiding principles that are put out to us in this reference document. And throughout the week, I think that the presentations we have received from the units, from the guest speakers, have made and hammered the point further on the importance of having a beneficiary approach, of then true involvement and social dialogue beyond our strategic policy dialogue. This was extremely clear for decent work, for employment, for social protection, health care, and health financing. We have the second principle about accountability, and that was also hammered with colleagues about budget support, about urban development and territorial development with the just transition. Building institutions is critical to what we do, and that goes also towards accountability. There was a clear call for redistribution with targeting the bottom 40. And I think throughout every presentation, or at least every session we had this week, there was evidence that we need data. We need to take the time to obtain the data. We need to support data collection, research, statistical offices, so we have the right perspective and understanding of the context to dialogue, to involve the stakeholders, especially beneficiaries, and support our formulations. And then addressing spatial inequalities and geographical targeting, this was evidenced, again, not only by urban and territorial development. I think we found it in health, we found it in social protection, we found it with environment and the climate change, and connections were made again by Anda David between just transition and the environment and climate change and social security and protection. So I think this week has been a strongly interconnected with a strong thread and red line throughout that we find in these guiding principles. And I will stop with reminding you that beyond and after the guiding principles, we have also offered a number of entry points that you can use in your work in delegations. And we really ask you to look into them and use this volume 3 of this reference guide in your work for addressing the reduction of inequalities. That's it for this short recap. I would like to stop here and obviously pass the floor to our colleagues, Christian and Mathilde.
Thank you so much. Okay, it's Friday, so let's try to be as more dynamic as possible, less boring as possible, because you're very tired. So today we're going to talk about the inequality marker. The disclaimer, I think, you so many times, so we just skip. They will be, okay, we can skip that too. Okay, what we are going to learn today. First of all, session 1. So we are going to get into the marker. So first of all, we will try to understand what the marker is, what it does not. That's also very important. Why it is important to focus on the bottom 40 or more disadvantaged, and how we create intersectionalities. Then we go to know the marker a bit better. So how the market basically works. How do you score your program based on the marker scale, the criteria for assessing, etc., etc. And then we go to application. So we are going to try to understand how you can apply the marker, what data you can use, what type of tools you can use to apply it, and of course, give you some example in order to show you concretely how does it work in some programs and projects that we invented basically, but also in concrete study that we conducted using the market tools. So that's for session 1. It will be quite informative. So first of all, understanding the e-marker. I leave the floor for a moment to Mathilde. They're going to explain the Commission agenda on that, please.
Thank you so much, Christian. And again, welcome you all. Thank you so much for being here for this last day. And just maybe to before beginning and explaining the Commission agenda. So I think you all know me now after this week of, but my name is Mathilde, Policy Officer at G4 Unit on Inequalities. And with Jérôme, who will be the facilitator, we will manage this, this first session before a panel with Philippe. So let's begin with this first slide. So inequality is one of the main priorities of the Commissioner, and I think that was really clear from day 1 to day 5. It was mentioned by Erika and Gabriela in the opening. The European Commission has made it a priority to address inequalities by building inclusive and sustainable societies. Equality is really at the heart of the EU social model, and the goal of reducing inequality is at the heart of many EU policies. I could quote the Charter of Fundamental Rights, the Treaty of Lisbon, the European Consensus of Development, or the staff working document, who was recently published in 2019, and in which you can find some recommendation on how to mainstream inequalities. And current global trends, and you know them, pandemic, inflation, food insecurity, conflicts, has made this priority even more crucial. By reversing the progress made and also increasing inequalities between and within countries. And faced with this context, the European Commission has been the first one developing a tool in order to better help you to mainstream inequality reduction in your project and program. And that's the objective of this session, is to present you this innovative tool that was recently endorsed by the European Commission in October 2022. So very recent. Oops. So what is the inequality marker? So the inequality marker is a recent tool with the objective to better understand, design, track, and benchmark the impact of our work on inequalities. And just maybe to make two short precisions. So the inequality marker is an internal European Commission tool, is not a DAC tool. Further discussion with DAC member states and with member states are ongoing, but for now, the inequality marker is just an internal tool that should be applied to all of our projects, program, and the SSHC fiche and action document template are now reflected this inequality marker. The inequality marker is not a tool also to measure the inequality changes between countries and within countries, is not a tool similar to the Gini index or the Palma ratio. It's more a policy and advocacy tool. It's a policy tool because it will help you to improve the design of intervention, to ensure that they have inequality reducing effects, meaning that now, drafting your action, you will need to think about inequalities. It's not only a box that you tick, it really is something that will help you and accompany you in designing your action. And in addition to be a policy tool, it's also an advocacy tool, because it will create a sound reporting and benchmarking system, enabling to clearly establish the contribution of all relevant intervention to inequalities. And that of course, will be very important for helping you conduct policy dialogue and communication. And now we let Christian to talk to you about what the iMarker does and does not.
Okay, let's start from what it does not. Just to briefly give you a basic assumption. So, I mean, a change in inequality at the country level, macro level, or the regional level, is due to a myriad of factors. Some factors are more or less in control of a country, like, I don't know, depending on the redistributive policy it does, or the labor market structure, the land wealth concentration, etc., etc. Some are less in control because it depends on the position in the world trade supply chain. So you are in this particular position of doing a program, a project, so an intervention, putting resource in a country to reduce inequality, but you have to understand that your contribution probably will is not going to do much in terms of reducing macro inequality measured with Gini, et cetera, because as said, there are many factors that influence this level of macro indicators that you are not in control of it. We have some study that try to understand the effects of development program and aid on macro level inequalities, but we have in microfinance, we saw in some employment intensive project, but there are a number of problems with this type of studies. First of all, they're useful, of course, that's not a problem, but they're extremely complex. They demand high level of expertise. They are time consuming, sometimes it's longitudinal. So you do it for years to understand what's going on. Very, very expensive. You all heard about the Duflo, the Nobel Prize. Well, she does this type of studies. Of course, they're excellent, but they're extremely complex. I don't think that also with your own budget of the delegation, we'll be able to undertake that type of analysis. So, okay, then what we can do? Well, we can do a very simple thing by following the SDG 10 principle. So we can assess, that's possible, whether and to what extent inequality reduction is an objective of a donor intervention, in this case, your intervention. Therefore, if you basically, to make it very simple, you dedicate resources to a larger extent to the bottom poorest 40% or other social economic disadvantage, individual group, because in some places disadvantage maybe is not measured with the official bottom 40% income or wealth or other social economic factors, etc., etc. By doing that, you basically foster the opportunities to increase income and social economic position, because remember, that's something that you heard many times during this week. Any policy can increase or decrease inequalities, because if you access to any type of goods, of service or assets, you give opportunities for people to increase their income and wealth and therefore reduce inequality. Of course, if you dedicate, if you give the possibility to the bottom 40 to have access more to the assets, goods, or services, therefore it's a matter of how you design your program, basically. So if you increase, I repeat, let's call it opportunities, but as I said, it could be an access to a normal service like an education or health or an infrastructure, land, microcredit, whatever. To lower income or wealth groups, you give them the possibility to increase their income and wealth in the future. But of course, in order to do it and to reduce inequality, you have to give more resources to them. So that's the simple principle that we can adopt that facilitate our life, because we are going to work more at the level of our program. So what our program does in redistributive terms for the people that are going to be involved in it. Of course, by doing that, we basically integrate the two aspects of inequality, the vertical aspects and the horizontal aspect. Why? Because by saying that, giving more resources and more access to the bottom 40, you will also, therefore, increase their income and wealth opportunities. That's the vertical part of the story. But you also consider the horizontal part of the story, because you look at income and wealth as a determinant of lack or more access to asset service that also foster income and wealth. So you take income and wealth in the two sides, the vertical side, so you want to increase income and wealth, but also the horizontal part. So income and wealth is a determinant of lack of access to many things. So you, with this definition, we are able to basically tackle the two aspects of the story.
And,
sorry.
and to complete, so really this marker, sometimes I receive this question, what is behind the inequality marker? It is really important to keep that in mind, that the inequality marker is not only about vertical inequality, it's not only about income inequality, socioeconomic aspect of inequality. Indeed, it will target the bottom 40%, which reflects the vertical inequality, but not only. It really takes into account the horizontal inequality, gender, disability, ethnicity, place of origin are also taken into account behind this marker. This marker is really at the crossroad between vertical inequality and horizontal inequality. And the multidimensionality aspect of that is taken into account by not only targeting the bottom poorest 40%, but also other disadvantaged individual, household, or groups.
Excellent. I'm going to go deeper in that because what Mathilde said are basically the two principles that are in the SDG 10, because SDG 10 is designed in a particular way. So you have the SDG 10 target 10.1 that says by 2030, progressively achieve and sustain income growth of the bottom 40% population higher than the national average. So what we imply with our marker is that if we give more resources to precisely to the bottom 40% population, as the SDG 10.1 says, we will be able to increase their income and wealth and therefore respect that target. That's the vertical aspect that Mathilde pointed out. So the greater the share of resources we give them, the greater the possibility of increasing their income and therefore reducing inequality. That's the idea, and that's an idea that, of course, I think you explained already I heard during the first day. It's different from poverty reduction, because the idea of poverty reduction is I focus my resources entirely on the bottom 40%. This is a different approach. I give to everyone something, but more to those at the bottom 40. They are twin targets and twin goals. They call actually twin goals. And there are studies, the Share Prosperity Report, for instance, of the World Bank that outlined the fact that if you target disproportionately the bottom 40s, so you follow the SDG 10.1 principle, you are likely also to reduce absolute poverty. The other way around, it's more complicated. That's why they call the twin goal, but SDG 10.1, it's more instrumental. Then, as Mathilde said, we are at the crossroad, because on the horizontal part, we said, okay, we look at income and wealth also as determinant of inequalities, but it's not alone. We have other determinants as well. Age, disability set, gender especially, ethnicity. So the idea is here to try to catch and provide more resources to those that are the most vulnerable, because they combine vulnerabilities together. A poor woman, a poor child, etc., etc. Why? Because imagine that you're going to do a program targeting women, for instance, but you don't think about the bottom 40 aspects. So you can certainly do something in terms of gender disparity and reduce gender disparity, but maybe you target higher income women, not low income. At the same time, I can target the bottom 40, but not women at all. So you have to try to cross all the vulnerabilities together, and the inequality marker allows you to basically do programs that really focus on those that are in most need, because they really combine all possible vulnerabilities that we have. So the horizontal and the vertical together, and of course, Mathilde can also explain a bit better. That's the target 10.2 that say basically that you have to give equal opportunities to all. So, and determinants, you have to tackle the determinants of the unequal opportunities. And this is connected to other instruments of the European Commission, I think.
And that is even more important, that the vulnerability that you mentioned are also reinforcing each other. We saw this concept during the first day, the concept of intersectionality, and that is very important. It's not only to be at the crossroad but also to anticipate that there is an intersectional aspect that could reinforce its vulnerability. And we will talk about that during the explanation of Christian about the distributional impact assessment tool. So now that we understand the I marker, we will try to know more about it. So just a little bit of element of context. So the I marker does not just appear one day. It was really a step-by-step process, and a really inclusive one also. It begins in 2021 with the drafting of the reference document addressing income inequality through development cooperation that has been drafted by at the time unit B3 at DEVCO, will become unit G4.
I think so, yes.
Exactly. Also in collaboration with other thematic units, because in the volume 2, we review the structure of the reference document in the first session, but the volume 2 is dedicated to 18 policy briefs, explaining the interlinkages with some policy sectors and inequalities. And all thematic unit intervene and draft together this policy brief. In addition of that, the I marker also was born through an IFD study, the distribution impact of development cooperations project. So also in discussion with member states. In 2022, the European Commission Inequality Marker guidelines and the one-pager were published. So they are available. You can find them in the resource page of our space, but also in the publication office, so online. And recently, in 2023, the G4 unit has been working on the INTPA complementary guidelines in order to help you, to support you in applying the I marker to SSS fiche and action documents. And that is the subject of our afternoon session. In April 2023, the objective would be to publicly launch the I marker, because for now, the I marker was launched internally to EU staff, INPA delegation, EAS, but the public launch should be made, and there is not an exact date for now. It should happen between April and June 2023. So of course we will keep you updated. So now concretely, how does it work? So as Christian said, the inequality marker will enable to assess whether and to what extent inequality reduction is an objective of an intervention, of your intervention, and how? By scoring each project against 3 levels, 0, 1, 2. It's a very simple, user-friendly methodology and very similar to the gender marker, disability marker. So it's something that you already know. So the 0 level, it's if inequality is not targeted. The level 1 is if inequality reduction is a significant objective, and level 2, if inequality reduction is a principal objective. And how to determine which level, which score to give to an intervention? By assessing your intervention against 4 criteria: analysis, objective and activities, indicators, and evaluation plan. So what does it mean? So analysis is analysis of the trends and driver of inequality in the policy area of your intervention. The objective and activities, it should be designed in a way, as Christian mentioned, to benefit directly the most vulnerable, the bottom 40%, but not only. It could also be other disadvantaged individual, taking into account gender, age, ethnicity, disability. Then some indicators should also be implementing part of the log frame in order to assess progress in delivering the expected benefits to the most vulnerable. And finally, an evaluation plan should also be designed in order to assess the impact on your project on the most vulnerable, bottom 40%, but not only. And that will be could be done through the DIA, distributional impact assessment. Weird word for now, but do not worry. We will also come back to that in a few minutes.
Okay, now we need to go outside and it's inside. Really.
So we'll go outside. Let's go and see what we
and
find.
show the, yeah,
Let's see what we find something.
indeed. Ah,
Is
that's
that what you wanted to
fantastic.
show?
Indeed.
So maybe I will expand it a bit further.
So, okay, so the people can,
Can you all read that? If you can give us a few thumbs up, or if our
Yeah.
colleagues from MKS can confirm it's okay.
Yes, it's readable.
Thank you.
excellent. So as Mathilde said, we have 4 criteria to try to understand whether our program, project, operation is 0, 1, or 2, how we basically give the note and rank to our intervention. Okay, I0, but it's very simple, very straightforward. We talk about analysis, not really analysis on incidence of any type of inequality, national or sectoral level. If you work, I don't know, on health, you don't look at all at inequalities in health, for instance. There's not an objective, concrete objective to reduce inequalities. No targets, of course, set to benefit in particular the bottom 40 or other social economic disadvantaged individual households combined together, as this is said, with intersectionalities. You don't find anything also in your evaluation plan. That's clear and simple. I don't think that we will find many programs I0 in INPA. I'm pretty sure most of them, they will be most probably I1. And I'm going to explain you a bit the difference between inequality mark 1 and inequality mark 2, which is, the best that you can have. Okay. Inequality mark 1. Let's try to see a bit together 1 and 2. So first, criteria. In inequality, if a project is inequality marked 1, means that there is, of course, an analysis. You can have an analysis, a general analysis about the situation of a country, or a specific sector. But you also have, of course, a generic understanding of the inequalities in this country or in a specific sector. Let me give you a simple example. Country X, question of microcredit. I'll give you just an example about that. A generic analysis is, okay, microcredit is important for economic development, etc., but also for reducing inequalities. What are the main issues in macrocredit? Absence of a certain scheme, regulations, etc., the banking sector willing to, and also the fact that is not available for informal economy, and informal economy is where the poorest are. So we need to do something, and therefore this is the way to eventually reduce inequality. That could be like a very general analysis, and you find basically, I mean, I don't know, probably 80% of the program and something like that. The difference between this and an analysis that in much more detail and bring you to a 2 level is that you really focus the analysis on inequality. So inequality at country level are at this stage. And one of the driver of inequalities is access to microcredit. That is not guaranteed for certain categories. It could be like certain territories, I don't know, rural areas, or certain groups, I don't know, informal economic groups, or certain, or women, or ethnicity, etc., and then makes them poorest, belonging to the bottom 40%. Therefore, we need to do actions to, get them access to it. That's a very detailed analysis, and we will see what type of data you can use for doing that. And of course, after you did that, you have different type of objective. So taking the same example, the inequality marked 1 objective will be, again, general. And at least one specific, in the general objective, you have this dimension. So it's a significant part, but not the principal one. And you have one specific objective that look this way. For instance, Our objective is to expand microcredit in this country because of inclusive development, economics, blah, 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 and because this reduces inequality. So my specific objective will be, I increase microcredit access to, I reform the legal basis for, et cetera, and I do a special scheme for the informal sector, because there they are the poorest. So I want to contribute to them specifically, then to reduce inequalities. That's, you know, an objective one, if you want. Or you can do, as I said, specific territory, rural, because the poorest are there mostly, or et cetera, et cetera. Instead, if you have a Mark II, then your objective is clearly another one. I want to reduce inequality in the country by the means of increasing access to microcredit. All the my specific objective will do that somewhat. So I want to reform the legal basis of microcredit and do partnership with the bank scheme so that also the bottom 40 can access, but you will must have at least one of them that specifically said the bottom 40. So for instance, I'm going to do training for accessing this type of new schemes to the bottom 40 vulnerable groups or social economic. It could be bottom 40 women, bottom 40 children, I hope not, or any other. Then, of course, your indicators are going to follow. Huh? And in the plan, that's very important, we will see later, in the evaluation plan, you can, of course, look in inequality Mark I, you can look at the evolution by simply, you know, looking at your how much you are able to extend to the areas you said, like informal sector, rural sector, et cetera, et cetera. In the inequality Mark II, your plan must have, should have, actually must have in this case, is compulsory, because you stated in an objective that the bottom 40 are your target. So you have to do distribution impact assessment. You will see what it is later. And but still, that you can also use a distribution impact assessment to assess what happened if your project is inequality Mark I. We will see that later, but you know, it's a bit nuanced. If you want a difference between 1 and 2, you have to keep in mind 1 is more generic. It's look at the word, it's significant, not principal, it's generic, it's amongst the objective. You have some mention on it. You don't have a very detailed analysis, but something is there. While for the 2, it's really your main focus. You want to do it in different way, but that's what you want to do. That's the idea. We can ask here.
You want to go back to your...
Yes, because it is fine. Voila, we did that. Perfect.
That's where you are, I think.
Okay.
Perfect.
So we did that.
Technical assistance, indirect.
Voila. Ah, no, we have to come back later, but anyway. So analysis of the driver, because then we go to the most, let's say, not complex, let's call it fascinating part. So how do we do that? Huh? Okay, we said the first thing is analysis. So analysis at country level. Okay, if you want to reach the maximum stage of inequality Mark II, you really need to have, and you will see an example later in the afternoon from our friend from Latin America, the LAC program. You really need to do a very accurate and detailed analysis. Of course, you need data, but data are not always there. So we are not going to be, you know, too strict in how the whole detail is. But the logic is that basically you have to link what's going on at national level of inequalities, and for that you can use the Gini, you can use other type of instrument. We are going to show you the list of possible data and instrument that you can use. The idea is that then you go down to say this is determined by some issues, some factors, some determinants, example, access to health, access to education, microcredit, infrastructure, whatever. Within that, then you're going to try to find where the driver, let's say the sub-drivers are. So, okay, inequality at the macro level is determined by access to education, What is the problem in inequality in access to education? A, B, C, D. That's the issue. You have to have a pretty good set of data. Let's come back to the. Sorry, I forgot.
Just to
We have to come back to
yeah,
the.
but I think for a matter
Go.
of time, to have more time for the panel, I would suggest that all the this list of data that Christian just mentioned in our space. So you have the link in the chat box, and please have a look on all the data. And again, but you can definitely. But you can definitely do not hesitate to reach us, because in addition to the data, we also have the research facility that could also give you more details and more knowledge about the driver and determinant that Christian just mentioned. In addition to the analysis, the G4 unit and the inequality team is working on other tools in order to really help you and support you. So you have the analysis, so mentioned by Christian, but we are also working with you in order to improve the indicators and to give them a very inequality lens. So we are developing inequality results and indicator following the methodology and structure of DG INTPA result and indicator for development. And now we begin with 2 sectors. It's a first study, and then we will expand it to other sector. So we are beginning with social protection and education. And the objective is really to update their research change in order to give them an inequality lens, but also to create some dedicated indicators that you will be able to use or in your specific log frame. In addition of that, so we have talked about analysis, indicators. We are also developing some tools in order to help you better design your objective, taking into account this inequality lens. As you may know, so the G4 unit as a facility, the HIPS facility, and every Thursday we have 3 hours where our expert will be here in order for you to ask all your questions regarding your action document speech, and if needed, of course, the inequality team at G4 unit is more than happy to join. And maybe you're also asking yourself, but what about the evaluation plan? And we are going to now see this part. A last point, maybe, before going to the tool dedicated to the evaluation plan, is just to tell you that these tools are in construction. And it is only with your support and your help and your feedback that we will be able to continue developing these tools in order for you, in order to develop them in a useful and helpful way. So please do not hesitate to reach to us. We can organize some bilateral calls in order for us to better also understand your needs and to create some dedicated tool that could be useful for you.
Okay, the so-called distributional impact assessment that you already heard. Let me explain you rapidly how does it work, basically, what it is. As Mathilde said, you have okay, you establish your problem, let's say, okay, that is how inequality are settled in this country. Example, in education as a driver, we are going to do something on access to education, etc. More you go down to reach and to touch the beneficiaries, more you have a problem because you don't have data. And there's an additional problem. I mean, Mathilde mentioned the gender marker. I mean, doing a program on gender-based approach and try to find women or assess and verify whether this program actually target women is quite straightforward. For the income and wealth is not. I mean, there's nothing, you know, a guy that say that you are at the bottom 40, you are at the top 20 or something like that. So you need numbers, you need data. That's the more complicated part. So you want to focus on the bottom 40, you have to design and try to catch them, do program for them, and then verify. You need data that you don't have. That's why we developed some tools, very easy, within the head of the distributional impact assessments. So the idea is that these complement the marker, because as I said, the main difference is that you need an empirical tool to understand where the bottom 40 are, how to reach them out, and verify whether you effectively reach them out. When you marked 2, as we said, since you put specific objective on that, distributional impact assessment is basically integrated in the project cycle. So it's more or less compulsory, and also will help you that to design. So you can use to ex ante to verify, but also, sorry, ex post to verify, and ex ante to understand how to reach them, to reach the bottom 40, which is not an easy task at all. Marked one, highly recommended, because I can say I want to do something, as we said, like microcredit in a rural area, because the poorest are there, and so I can disproportionately benefit bottom 40. Well, it's not, maybe it's not the case. You have to understand whether it is effectively the case. I will show you an example later on Benin that show you that effectively sometimes it's not the case at all. Mark 0, well, you don't focus on inequality, but as said, any program can actually contribute to inequality, even if it's not his intentional objective. So you can use it anyway. Also, if you mark your program as 0. There are two tools that we develop, but as Mathilde said, they are ongoing. So we need to upgrade them and also develop more on that. First is the equity tool. I'm going to explain you how does it work. It's very simple and straightforward, and we'll see the examples. That's for program projects. That's type of intervention. And the commitment for equity, that is for budget support. So let's start from equity tool. What is the equity tool? Well, first of all, I give you the characteristic. It's very quick. It takes a couple of months to do it. We're talking on experience because we did that. It's low cost. We tested in program is approximately 20K budget for doing that. Whatever the program is. Of course, if you put more, you have bigger sample because it's better. But I mean, that's the basic, it's fine. We'll show you later. It's user-friendly because it's very simple to understand. I'm going to explain you, and you will really understand how does it work very easily. So basically, we have a small set of questions, around 10, 15, that help you identify the wealth quintile of the respondent. And it's based on possession. So I ask you, what's your roof? It's made on what? You use electricity, use current water, drinkable water, etc. Based on your response, you can place you in a specific wealth quintile, because this is based on existing tool, which are the demographic health survey and the multiple indicator cluster survey, UNICEF and WHO, that every time you heard about this instrument, you always heard social economic index. So that's how they calculate. We extract some questions in order just to see the wealth quintile in which the respondent is. It's very easy. We can skip the example if you're late, no problem. So how do you use it? That's a different question than, when you use it. How do you use it? So you have a program, project, budget support. Always have multiple components. We got the example of the microcredit. You have different components. You act on the legal framework, you act on training, etc., etc. So when you can use the distribution impact assessment, anytime you have a targeted population. Example, microcredit again. One component is creation of the scheme, public credit institution with public sector. Second component is training of small enterprise owner. You can do the DIA on the component 2, not the 1. That's clear, because in the 2 you have physically beneficiaries that you can interview. That's very straightforward. You can conduct the equity tool on all beneficiaries. I mean, in case you have a training for 200 people or 500, or even 1,000, you can do it. Of course, if the number are very large, you can do a sample. So you sample the population of your beneficiaries, so you can conduct that. I mean, in some cases, of course, I can tell you that the equity tool can be absolutely redundant. If I'm going to do a program for the poorest children in a slum, I mean, I don't probably need to do the equity tool to understand, but there are rare cases because it's not very straightforward and easy.
But what is very important to say is that the distributional impact assessment does not need to be conducted for the overall project.
No.
It should be only for a specific component that makes sense.
Exactly.
So,
Sense and possibility.
Exactly.
So targeted population. I mean, you cannot do a DIA on the impact of the legal framework on it, because it's going to be excessive, right? So other issue. As we said, I mean, we're discussing and we're proposing some example, right? Like microcredit. Sometimes your inequality are territorial based. So you basically find that inequalities in access of something are based on the fact that rural are more access, or center of cities are more access, or region some instead of other. That's you can do the distribution assessment at geographical level. So the example is you do like an infrastructure, you touch different regions, you want to understand the population of the regions because you do at local geographical level. So you understand the incidence of the bottom 14 within these areas. That's one thing. Then we said before, intersectionalities. How does it work? You can add to your 15 questions and they become 20. You can add other questions, the age, gender of the respondents and the component of the household, ethnicity, religion, if they're disabled, etc., etc. So you see whether your beneficiaries are poor women, poor children, and whether your program is actually benefiting more, example, poor women or poor men. We will see later in an example. Do you remember when we talk about the vertical part of inequality and we say, if the principle that we adopt, if I give more resources to the bottom 40 to access something, and this something contribute to income, well, you can verify that through the equity tool. You do ex ante your analysis, you do ex post your analysis, you ask whether there's a change on income. You can also put some question on that, and you will see whether this program actually contributed to it. So that's the way to see all the and I'll show you an example. It's very informative. Commitment for equity, I said, is for budget support. Budget support, it's another story, of course. In this case, you have to understand basically whether the bottom 40 poorest percent or other groups disproportionately benefit from expenditure, public expenditure. That's also part of the SDG 10, because the SDG 10.4 talked about it. It talked about fiscal, social protection policies, progressively achieve greater equality. So that's the idea. I provide budget, I support budget. So I want to understand what this budget does. If it goes disproportionately to the bottom 4. It's a very simple concept. It's exactly the same, because this also contribute to increase their income and wealth and reduce inequality. So how do you do it? Well, that's a bit complicated, but I'm going to make it simple. So the commitment for equity tell you three things, okay? First, okay, and that you do it immediately. Okay, I'm going to do a budget support for health reform. We will see later in an example. Well, how the actual public expenditure on health redistributes. You have to compare, basically, the Gini coefficients that tells you the inequality at the market level, so at Gini market level, and what we called coefficient, concentration coefficient, complicated, but I'm going to tell you what it is, for that budget sector. So it's the coefficient is the same, it's the same way as the Gini. It's 0.1. It tells you, how much, let's say, the public expenditure are distributed equally or not. So the logic is that this number should be, that you see that there, the concentration coefficients supported by you in the area of the budget that you support should be less than the Gini, because that means that it's more redistributive than the Gini, and that's important because it tells you that your area of budget is redistributing better than. That's the logic, but it should also be negative. Take it as granted because it's complicated to explain. In order to be actually pro-poor, so benefit the 40%, because I can also have a public expenditure, that compared to Gini, it's lower. So the effects of the transfer is reducing, the inequalities, but I can do it for middle class. No, it depends on how. So in order for me, for my purpose to be valuable, it should be negative. I will show you in an example in Colombia. And of course, you can calculate the share that goes to the bottom 40 of the budget. So it's a complete set that tells you plenty of information. So that's You will see in the concrete example. Again, also in budget support, it could be geographical issues. So the issues could be that some areas, territories receive less budget than the others. It's always like that, in fact, and that's one of the issues that create also tension sometimes. So you can do that at subnational level, of course, and that's always the story. If specific data about how the budget is redistributed in department or area are available. Similarly, you can look at intersectionalities, because that type of exercise is always done for gender or other type of, for instance, UNICEF do for children. So you can mix the various tools and see the interactions. So that's for the explanation.
Another concrete example.
Voilà, first.
So just to reassure you, this training is not the only source of knowledge you will have regarding the distributional impact assessment. I know that it could be very scary at the beginning because it's kind of a complex tool, because there is a different thing between budget support, program grants, etc. So the facility that we have, and G4Unit, is also here in order to support you daily in order to implement this distributional impact assessment if you decided to implement in your project or program. So please do not hesitate again to reach to us. I think it's one of the main message that we want to convey today is that is not the only time that we will stay in contact. We will have this regular contacts in order to support you to apply the I marker. So now, concrete example on the application of the I marker. So we will begin with some thematic example, and then we are going to some regional example. So first, an example of the application of the I marker on an educational program. So imagine that you have a project program with the objective of increasing access to preschool education. Is it an I1, I2? How do you know? If it would be an I1, if it's an instance, if an example of an activity, you are planning to build preschool premises, including in areas where poor children live. Okay, then I1, but you are providing a general analysis, not necessarily a distributional impact assessment, and it could begin. It has a great potential of becoming an I2, and it could begin an I2 if other criteria are met. If a detailed analysis is made about factors prevented access to preschool education for poorer children, for example, prevalence of private sectors, fees, lack of resources in some area, etc. If there is a specific objective to increase access among poorer children by building premises in specific areas, and if also you are integrating a DNA in your project. In that case, this project could definitely be marked as I2. And just one point, because it's something that we added from the session on social protection, because this session make a very good point about the concept of universality, and the way that universality is one of the most efficient way of decreasing inequality, and definitely it's a great strategy for that. It does not necessarily mean equality, there are two different tools, but it's one of the best strategy to achieve inequalities decrease.
Let me add something on that, because it's very important. Also, when you aim at universality, you must eventually do some ex-ante analysis. Give the example of the preschool. I want a way to give equal access to preschool education is to physically build preschool premises a bit everywhere, but where? That's the point. Because the where makes a difference. You can build in a specific area and maybe it's far away from village. So how do you take into account that? That's an ex-ante analysis to understand how your universality actually works. Remember that we have universal education in Europe, but inequalities still persist because it also depends on what type of education you give, etc. So it's surely the best strategy because it provides access to everybody, especially the bottom 40. But you still need to do a bit, you still have this reflex.
Yeah.
And also do eventually some analysis.
To put more efforts to reach the poorest.
And to understand how. That's the point. Because, as I said, I think that you will see The equity tool, you also, for instance, you can use the equity tool to understand where the poorest are and what are their needs, because you can add question on that.
Indeed, it is one point that was made by the social protection team, is that targeting is a thing and reaching is another thing. And you need, even in the concept of universality, you need to put more efforts to really reach the poorest and to understand the context that they could face.
Exactly. Similarly, technical assistance. Technical assistance, I don't know, we do. In general, there are components on technical assistance. I do a training to reinforce the capacity of an NGO, something like that. That's technical assistance. Let's take a teacher training, because teacher training is, you know, a program that in general we do at the European Commission INPA. Well, I can have a project earmark 1 if I think that, for instance, I will develop a teaching training module to increase quality of education amongst all pupils, including, of course, those that are the poorest, the bottom 40 or other socially disadvantaged group. That's an idea. So you phrase and you design your program this way. But you can also have an equality mark 2, for instance. If you say, I want to tackle inequalities, and amongst the factors, as we just said, increasing inequalities in education, there's the type of pedagogy adopted, then I'm going to, because some type of pedagogy increase inequalities and don't decrease if they're not inclusive. So I can, you know, construct my technical assistant, in this case, training for teacher in the way that foster inclusiveness, or even to do specifically for teachers that are in particular areas where the poorest are and they need a different type of training. So you construct the training with your earmark 2 in your mind, with your lens. Infrastructure project is another example. The railways, I mean, just think about a project earmark 1 on railways. The idea would be, well, countries should develop, infrastructure is an issue, some areas are not covered, so we want to extend the railways network, especially also in the rural areas, because the poorest are there, and therefore without that they cannot access opportunities for trade, commerce, etc., etc. That's an earmark 1. So you have different type of them, specific objective plus activities, amongst which that also those to extend in rural areas. Okay. Instead, you can have an earmark 2 if you say, no, wait, inequality is my problem here, and the driver is lack of access to infrastructure, especially in rural area, because the same thing that we said before, but the lens is more on that. Then I do every single activities and specific objective to reach that stage. Example, not only I try to extend in rural area the network, I try to do scheme for reducing cost of tickets, because I thought about it. If I have inequality in my lens, I think about, okay, that could be a train, but if they cannot access because they don't have vehicle. We are doing right now an ex-ante analysis for AFD on water access, to understand what are the problems to access water, not only the fact that you build the pipeline in specific district, but, you know, how do you manage the cost, etc., etc. So that could be an example.
And a particular relevant example in the context of the global gateway, I would say.
Exactly, because that's the idea. You can also think about just, you know, in some cases they are so complex and so macro that cannot be the principal objective. It could be a significant one, and a significant one could be, look, okay, we are going to build something in a context. We have to ensure that at least some trade-off are created for the poorest. How we can do it? We can do, like, I don't know, I create some connections between the main train station and the poorest village, something, but you have at least one component, and that's give you, if you have the inequality lens, you can see that. And of course you can use tools to do it.
So it really means that even in a project dedicated to infrastructure and labeled global gateway, inequality is here.
Yeah, give you an example that is actual. Djibouti-Ethiopia corridor, trade corridor. Yeah. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting project because it's a very macro. It's an EU project with AFD. Exactly. There are many components. Of course, one of these is how to redo the trade system in terms of the framework of the trade system, how to do capacities for company too. But they thought about one fact. If I do this corridor, I'm going to indirectly touch some people that are the lowest income that works at the border. So I can do a specific objective for them, a training on how they can use the mega framework and macro level to increase their earnings and income. That's really good. That's a really good example of how does it work.
And this one, Ben,
This one, it's a very good example, and you will see how you use the distribution impact assessment and what can get wrong, actually. So that was a program implemented by AfD. It's closed. So the objective was basically to reach out electrification in rural areas because they are unserved in the country. I show you just on the right side the part that includes inequality, because the idea is we reach 105 villages in rural areas, unserved areas. That's increase the economic development, business opportunities, etc., amongst which also probably reduce inequalities, because these areas are those where, you know, the people below $1.9 a day poverty line live. Of course, there was not set in the bottom 40 because it's an old project, so you would just want to look at it. So you have different activities and objective. Of course, increase the population access to electricity in rural area, but that's not an inequality type of. It's increase in general. So you imply that is in a rural area you have that. That's fine. Strengthening management capacity, etc., and that's very interesting. Introducing innovative approach and techniques to give appropriate solution for poorest rural population for pay, because I mean that's cost. So you can have like a fantastic electrification, but you don't have solution for them to pay. So that's inequality mark 1 typical, because it's significant, not the only one. It goes more indirect and generic. There's an analysis in that, of course, but as I said, it's very generic, and of course includes that component. So what we did, basically, we did a distributional impact assessment with the equity tool. We get a sample of more than 2,300 households, representing the population of the not 105, but 97 villages, because some villages, we were not sure that actually the electrification was finally made. And look at what happened. So bottom 40 is the bar 1 and bar 2. And you see very, very, very little share of bottom 40 in this project, which is quite surprising, because you assume that in rural areas you have especially bottom 40, that is always the case. And since the project is planned to do something in rural areas, well, of course, that was puzzling. That's what we found out, that in fact, the 105 villages selected, 90% were in urban areas and not in rural areas. That's why you don't find the bottom 40 comparing to the rural distribution of the country. I'm not going to, we are still investigating what happened, but I mean, the most logical thing is basically that it's complicated to do infrastructure project, you know, in very remote area. So what they did, they just connect what they were existing, and of course was close to urban area. So we rerun the project, and you see that bar 2 now it's much higher, but of course, since they are in any case urban area, you don't see much of the, let's say, bottom 10. That's the point. What is interesting is that it seems that the project targeted better poor women than men. Look at the bottom. So you see that 2, it's much higher when you look at women than not men. So it's intersectionality in this case worked. But that's, of course, I mean, what we, of course, with AfD, we had a reflection. We say we should have done the DIA before to understand, you know, what was really happening in the locality we selected, and maybe to select the locality difference, in a different way. Now I give an example of Colombia. That's budget support. That's very interesting because that's also a Mark 1. It was an AfD program of budget support. So that was to basically assist, implement the reform of the public health system. The reform aimed at improving equity. So you have your one, at least, of your sub-objective that is specific on inequality. And also the efficiency, of course, reorienting the health system toward prevention, you know, rather than, and improving the quality in general. That was a big loan from AFD. So we did the calculation in this case on the fiscal incidence. It's important to understand the commitment for equity is the tool that promotes Oxfam as well to do this. We just, modified some part to see what we want to see. So look at what happened. As I said, the importance is that the inequality coefficient of the spending of health is lower than the inequality existing in the market, because it means that the transfer works. It is actually, it's the red bar, it's health. It's much lower than the blue bar, which is the Gini income at market level. Right. Problem is that it's not negative, it's positive, which means that yes, it reduces inequality, but not specifically by lifting up the bottom 40s. And we saw that even more clearly by looking at how much of the share of expenditure of health goes to bottom 40, and you see it's below 40%. So it's 32, while other expenditure in education are higher. And of course, you see, if we go back, they are negative. Look at the education is, I think, yellow, or direct transfer. This is the typical, social protection transfers, of course, which 60%. That's tell you that basically, so in this case, you're going to check of the entire budget support after that you provide the funds. So, okay, yes, it reduced inequalities. So the equity aspect of the objective was there, but not necessarily for the bottom 40, probably for other type, other quintile. So that's something as well to, but that could be, it could be a reason for that, because there was, at the time, there was an indicators attached to the transfer. So I give you this transfer in order to, and for me to verify, in general, it's happened like that to reach a certain goal, a target, but the target was not set in terms of increasing access to basic to the poorest. It was general. So increasing access to basic health or quality of basic health. And of course, you don't then direct using what you have towards the bottom 40. Well, that's two examples. I repeat, to do this analysis didn't take much time. It didn't take much money. It's really cheap, actually. The only thing that is important is that a delegation provide the documentation, complete documentation. So we understand where this project happened and to whom it was directed. It possibly to provide a market survey company, a very simple market survey company. They can do also survey for, I don't know, business. No problem, because they just need to do this 12 questionnaire, or in the case of incidence analysis, to have some data.
12 questions.
It's 12 questions. So it's very simple. We need to have that. That's it. And it's going to be very fast and plenty of information for you to understand how to go, where you go, and verify. Survey time. We present the survey. Okay. So
we're gonna move back to our survey mechanism and tools.
Yes.
Okay. As we do so, could you remind our colleagues online, when do you advise to do this distributional impact assessment and this the use of these tools in the project cycle?
Yes. So I mean, the idea is that it's the distribution impact assessment, as I said, it's very useful when you go down to the beneficiaries level and you don't have data. So you have to have your own data. You cannot find data around. So you produce your own data. So it's a very quick tool to actually do the data. For eMarks 2, it's kind of standard because you put an indicator and you put the specific objective of that. For 1, it could be also, we saw for Colombia and Benin, there are Mark 1, but I mean, maybe you want to verify or select properly the beneficiaries. So that's the, so that is when you are going to use it. So the point is that, did you already use it? The eMarker in general, or even to, try to understand, so no, but 1 is yes. That is 2 is yes. That's really nice. We wait a little bit for results.
Maybe we'll read the question.
Little by little. So the first is exactly if you already use it, it's new. So course, it will be not much of use, but already some is already important. So, and then to what extent the market helped you, or will help? Because of course, if you didn't use it, you can also reply by what you have listened, you will help in design equality reducing interventions. And right,
So what do we find?
we wait a bit. Well,
Yeah.
we're still waiting, no, for some to put their. Huh?
Let's wait and let's wait a little bit.
Is moving
And
still, but I can.
and especially because indeed the action document template was updated in November, October, so at the same time where the inequality marker was endorsed, but the SSS fish template was recently updated with the inequality marker mentioned.
I think we are fine.
Yeah,
So-
that will be interesting in the discussion to see a bit, not
Yeah.
only in terms of SSC fishes, what codes, how we can support them at that stage.
Thank you, Philippe. Other words you want to share with us while we wait for more statistics at this point?
No. I mean, it'll be interesting. I mean, it's already very good. I mean, when I see the use of the marker, I mean, again, this is new. We're using it for the first time in 2023, but we have already gone through in SSC systematically all the AAPs that are coming up so that we can indeed have a benchmark in 2023 about where we stand. So that diagram, that fromage is good. The other one also, to what extent it helps. I mean, I think this is encouraging again, but maybe for the discussion is when people say, well, it doesn't really help me, or to a small extent, how can we help you?
Yes.
Use the markers that help
Can
you
improve
more.
it. Yeah.
So that would be interesting to get into the feedback.
I just want to make sure that all participants have had access to the link, probably it's in the chat. So if you look in your chat on Zoom, you will find the link to this platform so we can answer the questions. We can get as many answers as possible.
No, I think it will be useful indeed for the colleagues. I mean, online that are replying. Obviously, thanks for the use of the marker. Again, something that's already systematically applied in all SSC fishes and throughout all AAPs 2023, which pretty much we've got. I mean, we are reaching the end of most of them, obviously. But for those that are saying, yes, I know, yes, I'm aware, but it's not, I mean, it's helping me to a small extent, a very small extent. Tell us why, or tell us how we could help you more, not only being aware and using the marker, but in the design, in what Christian and Mathilde have been explaining in actually turning it into the action document and the concrete operations that you run on the ground.
But I don't know, Angie, were you able to show? Okay, we don't see that we have questions coming up, but Angie, could you show the documents we suggested? Okay, please.
I'm coming.
We're getting a few more. So that for the colleagues to know, they will have access to all of these links, to all of these tools that were mentioned by Christian and Mathilde that you can use. So they are here on the platform. I don't know why
It's okay.
jumping
That's
up and then
the questionnaire that is very interesting because it's very short, as you can see. So it's not
So
really
it just
complicated
to-
to do.
Yeah.
illustrate what Christian was saying about being
Yeah.
fast and rather cheap while giving you very useful information. Okay, that's it. And then maybe we just go back and
Yeah,
you make- you
that's
ask
it's a
what-
very actually I want to reiterate what Philippe said. It's very encouraging because most of the answer are in any case from moderate to a very large extent. Of course, there are some that outline small and very small, and that will be very interesting to hear why, and also as a way to upgrade the tool and also eventually support. But of course, also for those that they outline that it could be, for moderate, large, or very large extent, useful. Why and what we can do also better. Of course, it will be also interesting to have the example of those that they already use it, because it's I didn't know it, and that's very nice to understand on what purpose they use it and why eventually they estimated was useful. So I think that it's quite encouraging in terms of the survey.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for expressing
let us go back
your views.
for the last elements of your presentation before we
Yeah.
move to an open questions.
Yeah.
Should you?
Yes. Well, I already talked about the advantage of the marker and the DIA. It's simple. It's straightforward. It's similar to something that you already use. It tells you the extent to which development cooperation address implicit or implicitly, directly and indirectly inequalities. It's very straightforward because it focuses on your beneficiaries. It includes the DIA. That is quite unique because for other tools you don't have empirical instrument to actually verify. The DIA, as I said, it's you saw it is quite straightforward. If you want, then during the discussion we can also, give you more detail on how does it work and what we need to do in order to perform it. It's not expensive. It is short in terms of time. Give you a very good number of information that you can use to reach out, as I said, not target, but reaching out, meaning finding, and of course, characteristics of these people and how then you have to construct your program, while also allow you to do it on a geographical level and not only individual level, and mix other parts, which is other sectionalities, gender, religion, age. So to see how your project does. Yeah, exactly. Well, of course, there's limitations. First of all, clearly, the equity tool relies on wealth and not income. That's a point, because income is an aggregate indicator for measurements. But for that, we are thinking on developing also similar to very simple for income, so we can overcome this problem. Well, all these tools are based on pre-existing household survey data. As I said, in the case of the equity tool questionnaire that I mentioned, is the DHS, WHO, UNICEF mix, World Bank LSMS for incoming case. We're going to develop this. So, I mean, could be that in some cases, you will not find these tools to compare and to. So,
Could be old.
Exactly, or could be old, updated. So you need to, well, we can think about some solutions. There are some very innovative solutions to overcome that. Maybe we will discuss later, but that's a clear limitation. Other limitation is, well, the DIA require full cooperation from project management and national counterparts, because, I mean, you have to have information, good information about what's going on, where did you do your project, where you intend to do your project, so to get the best support you can. Just for experience, because we didn't implement the DIA with you, we did with the AFD. In some cases, we could not, simply because there was, it was difficult. It was not integrated in the project cycle, so you could not really feel as part of your work. So it was really, complicated with the information. But in the case you do it in the project cycle, so when you think about your project, and you said you go at the beneficiaries level, so you, in order to sometimes even before to do some analysis, they're not present, so at the analysis level, and then of course at the objective level in case you, but especially the indicators and monitoring of it. So that's when you can think about it, the use, and you can have it. So if you integrate immediately in your project cycle since the design, then it's part of what you're going to do and how to support your work. So it's different. Then another point is, in some countries, DIA can be extremely difficult to do. I mean, sometimes impossible. Example, but this is also common for project. You have areas, conflict areas. We cannot send enumerators to collect information in villages. It's too dangerous. You have natural disaster, etc., etc. So in that, or you can have hostility from governments because you're profiling people. It's happened to us in some countries. So the point is, you have to relativize what you're doing. So also, and this is my personal advice, when you think about inequalities, there's a dimension which is the national level, of course. There's a dimension which is the same areas that you were, if you go to rural or urban, but there's also dimension of geographical. So if you cannot reach out some areas because you cannot, you wish to, but you cannot, it's clear that maybe this area in general where the conflicts are those where the poorest live. So you have to relativize your impact on the beneficiaries by saying, I can reduce inequalities within the area in which I can work. Okay, I cannot do maybe a national level because it's impossible. It's beyond my control and possibility. Still, when you face issues of governments hostile because you're profiling, well, that's also a matter of effectiveness and transparency that you have to put in front of your partners, because that's something that, so lessons
Your
learned.
control and being also your resources and budget,
Exactly,
because
exactly.
it was one of the point that was making in the nutrition session, I remember, by the head of cooperation from Gabo Verde, but I was saying that we are a donor with the resources that we have, and indeed sometimes we need to make some choices. It's not possible to act everywhere.
Yeah.
So in addition to the external factor, there is also some financial factor that we need to take into account.
Absolutely.
And maybe last point, just before going to the panel, so with Philippe Latriche, and please do not hesitate to already ask your question in the house page chat. So you will find the link in the Zoom chat that will redirect you to the house page. But we've seen that there are already some questions, so great, and do not hesitate to continue drafting them. So some lessons learned, and maybe to summarize a little bit. So the inequality marker is a new tool. Recently endorsed, that was not already used by everyone, but the objective is really to continue its dissemination throughout 2023. And the inequality marker, as well as the distributional impact assessment, should be integrated in your project cycle. And since the beginning, and since the identification and formulation phase. So since the SSS fiche and action document, if we are mentioning the project document that we are using. And in addition to the identification phase, is something that we will see during the afternoon session. It should the inequality subject, inequality marker, should already be part of your prospection phase during the policy dialogue you will have with partner countries. Policy dialogue was something that we mentioned in session 1, with all the difficulties around and all the challenges around it. Indeed, inequality is a politically sensitive subject. It's not always possible to talk about it, but sometimes one way to introduce this subject is either through a priority area of the country, education, health, or also through research, through a neutral and objective way. As it was also mentioned, so it's an ongoing process, is not finished at all. We will continue to explore new tools. And for example, Christian was mentioning that the distribution impact assessment, so this survey with the several questions, is for now only based on the wealth and assets. But one of the objectives that we will have is to extend it and to integrate this income aspect. In addition of that, we will also conduct an investment study in order to know how to integrate the marker, because one of the main tools that we are using now is the FSD+. And we will really try to understand how the marker could be integrated in this tool. Finally, this training is not the last one. There will be all the training, all the one page has been published. There will be also a short video that you can use just to have it's 2-minute video that we are building now, that will give you all in a very simple, user-friendly way, all the elements that we are discussing today. So also happy to really to disseminate this video through our capacity for dev group, and you will be able to find this link in the resource page. So now I will invite the panel to begin.
To discuss.
Exactly.
You're the
And-
panel.
We
You also have to check
Yeah,
whether
yeah.
colleagues have
Exactly.
I think it'll be good, yes.
Yeah.
No, just maybe quickly, while we're looking at the question popping up for colleagues you know, in INPA or from delegations actually. I think that's the main point. Thanks a lot to Mathilde and Christian and Jérôme, by the way, not only for today, but also for the whole week. Just two things indeed to go in the same direction as what Mathilde was just saying. We actually had a quick management meeting. I was there just before coming this morning, where both Koen and Erika underlined both the importance of working on inequality, what you're doing this week. And the commissioner, as you know, was also on Tuesday in the Equality Day organized by Concord, underlying the importance of the work. So thanks for it, because I mean it's timely and it's politically relevant. And just to jump on, indeed, the link that you were making between connecting the dots. I mean, it's not like we do an inequality somewhere, SDG somewhere else, and global gateway is also something else somewhere else. We need to connect the dots, and indeed. Global gateway, as you mentioned, is not only about hard infrastructure. This is hard and soft, and this is a 360 approach to what, and this is in the soft area that we need from the start to make sure that the inequality dimension of what we do is inserted. So just a quick thanks and reaction to what was said. Okay,
So if we move to the questions,
yeah, please do, because the most important is in your questions and how we can help you from here.
I think the how we can help you, I think, is very important, and if colleagues can keep on posting on that.
Indeed.
On the first question, I have not heard the speakers discuss the causes of inequality. There is much reference to descriptive determinants. However, to tackle, eliminate inequalities, you need to go far deeper and identify the causes. I do believe we addressed these questions, and we presented elements of that on the day one and throughout the different technical sessions. So maybe that was not clear enough, but I believe that through the commitment to equity with Tulane University, the commitment to reduce inequality index from Oxfam, the session on social protection with Dr. Stephen Kidd, or on health with Dr. Kitson. I forgot.
Yeah, I mean,
we had a lot of analysis of determinants and how to look at the causes of inequality.
Yeah,
perhaps you want to discuss.
No, I agree. I mean, this was raised throughout the week. I mean, there's a policy dimension, which is key, and the determinants, and a lot of them are based on countries' own domestic policies. But there's also, and that's the idea here, is I mean, as Jérôme, Christian, and Mathilde said, this is a complex issue, fine. But for what we're in charge of, and when we go into designing our concrete operations, how can we be, better equipped, better at analyzing, at designing, at targeting, as using data to make sure that our operation, in that broader context, that where indeed, I mean, I agree, there are other determinants on which we don't have a hand and a grasp, we can still make sure that we have the highest impact with our operations. So agree, the policy framework and the broader framework, international, domestic, obviously has to some extent more impact on inequalities than what we can do with a single project. But for what we master, what we're in charge of, we can still make the link in the analysis, design, and impact of what we do.
Then we have a question on the Gini and the discussion on Gini, but I don't think the focus was on Gini throughout the discussions. But
there's a point.
There's a point. But on day one, I think Teresa presented the limitation of that measurement and why we should look beyond Gini to understand inequalities and address issues. But maybe you want to
there's a point.
The issue of wealth and income.
No, there's a point, in fact, when the question say about wealth concentration and measuring wealth, is right in say that the wealth does not provide a comprehensive picture of reality. I add something more. Wealth is based on assets. So I give you a simple example. When we look at the equity tool for Benin, for instance, right? And you saw that very little of the beneficiaries were in bottom 40. It might be, but we don't know because we didn't do it ex ante, that the access to electricity, since it's a key asset to calculate wealth, increase their wealth. And therefore, you don't see much of the share of beneficiaries in the bottom wealth quintile. That's a problem with wealth. Also, we don't know if this has an impact on income, because I can access electricity, but I can spend all my income on that. So I can be, in the,
Yeah.
not in the bottom for wealth quintile, but can be in the bottom for income. That's why we are thinking on doing similar tools on income, because you have to mix the two. In some cases, just use income. In some others, mix the two to understand. But the income dimension is crucial. It might not be captured by only looking at wealth. So it's a perfect and logical point that we really discussed, because this limitation is really clear for me. I mean, it's excellent.
Yeah.
Other questions coming up, or perhaps colleagues may, we stop sharing the screen and colleagues take the floor.
Right.
Maybe we could do that as well to see. We are together now. We stop sharing our screen. Could you get back to your screens perhaps and switch on your camera? And maybe you want to raise questions directly. I mean, we are here together. We don't only need to interact through our space. We can just take the floor. This is your session.
Sorry, I can see on the screen.
Perhaps people want to see.
Yeah, exactly.
No, please shoot again in whatever you think we can do from HQ here to help you de facto and translate and start having with all the limitations. I mean, as Christian and Mathilde explained, this is to establish a first benchmark in 2023 about where we stand. So that it's not only a political commitment from the commissioner and a message that we keep on passing, but that we actually show concretely, as much as we can with the tools that we have right now, how this is actually translated in our operations. And make the links, because indeed, Global Gateway is about connectivity, but this is a 360 approach, meaning hard and soft. And in the soft part of it, that's where, as I said, I think it's key to also in the design, as much as we can for now, and to continue in 2024 and so forth, to show that we care about this in the early thinking and design of our operations. So tell us a bit more, and I see also from being in the SSC meetings, the efforts to, and it was good to see in the diagram that you're aware you're using. Tell us, in which ways we can help, but that this is actually factored in early on. I mean, we're reaching the end of the SSC meetings on AAPs 2023. So that we can actually implement, and that will already give us a first benchmark, and we'll certainly continue to do so and improve it for the year 2024. But whatever we can in that phase, already early on, SSC action documents and so forth, discussion to do from our end, please, because this is what will allow the commissioner, Kuhn, us collectively to say, especially in important meetings we're going to have this year on equality, inequalities, sustainable development goals, and so forth, to say this is more than simply a political discourse. But I can't see if there's a hands raised or
Not yet.
But maybe,
I mean,
Go ahead.
if not, but I would have a question for you, and I think it's also a question that colleagues have. It was also a question that was raised during the Equality Day organized by Concord. Is really this link between global gateway and inequality.
Yeah.
And is inequality part of global gateway also?
yes, it is.
Voilà.
No, yes, it is. No, I mean, fair questions or fair response to some criticisms that we're sometimes getting from civil society organizations saying global gateway is only about hard infrastructure, and how can you actually factor in those commitments? And the first reply, at least for what you are doing, we in INTPA are doing collectively, is that whatever our EU contribution to the Team Europe approach and commitments to Global Gateway will obviously, this, you're involved in HQ and in delegations, will follow our NDICI commitment, meaning in terms of, let's say, commitments, human rights-based approach, in terms of our very specific, also quantitative or qualitative commitments that we've taken to spend 20% of the NDICI and human development funds. The gender, obviously, targets, they're there. So our EU contributions to Global Gateway projects, together with member states, European financial institutions, and so forth, will obviously follow our rules and therefore also tackle the inequality dimension that we promote. But thanks, because this is something that comes up on a regular basis. And again, not only hard infrastructure, but let's say the EU approach and added value in such an endeavor and connectivity is also the soft that we bring around.
I think,
I see your hand
I think there's a
raised,
question
so-
from Chiara.
Great. Please, colleagues,
Please,
I
shoot.
reiterate my plea, put your camera on.
Hi, thank you very much for this opportunity and for the training. I would like to take the chance to say I found it really very well structured and very, I mean, excellent, to be honest, in terms of speakers and the sessions that you proposed. Also the fact that we could choose which sessions to attend, because of course with workload is difficult. And for the inequality marker, thanks a lot. I work in the budget support team for Asia Pacific here in Unit C2. So I found the example you gave for budget support program also very relevant. And in general, I think, I mean, I really appreciate the effort from the Commission of looking more into addressing inequalities, because in the end, for me, that's one of the reasons why I had joined the development cooperation and started working in this area. So I think, indeed, it's important that there is a reflection and that we try to have a collective effort on this. So I appreciate the introduction of the marker, but I have to say that before the training, it's true, I didn't really know how you wanted us to use it. And also basically that indeed I had this question. I mean, this is a really a commission marker, and maybe we have to raise even more awareness on the colleagues in delegation about this and the fact that, I mean, in the end, it will be a bit difficult to implement, because I think the DIA and the assessment is really key, and we need to be sure that it's done properly. Because, okay, about studying about development interventions, I think come across other methods like the randomized trial assessment. I mean, it's difficult, to be honest, when you want to develop your intervention, to see which stakeholders you need to target and how really to identify the bottom 40%. And I think you have highlighted in the presentation the challenges of getting the information from the governments. And so, I mean, the thing is, I think it's a very commendable effort, but we have to see how deeply we can really correctly perhaps implement it. I mean, we shouldn't have the impression that it's just another market that we only need to tick, because indeed I think it will be a bit more complicated to implement. But again, I appreciate the objective and the efforts, and we can see perhaps more on how this DIA should be implemented, if you then come across other good examples that you can give, apart from this afternoon, let's say, that you could make available to colleagues in delegation. I think that would be great. Thanks.
No, I mean, thanks, Chiara. Thanks for your commitment. It was what you said was exactly the first sentence I think that the commissioner used on Tuesday for this Equality Day, and the reason why she went into politics. So maybe you also have a political life after the unit you're in right now. No, seriously, thanks, and agreeing also with the complexity. But as I mean, again, as long as you're doing, we are also connecting the dots between what we do through different units in INPA, different tools that we have, from budget reports to other kind of interventions. I think we're doing the right thing, and we can be both ambitious about, you know, establishing a first benchmark in 2023 about where we stand, and at the same time recognizing that this is a complicated issue, you know, and that's what we're doing. We're doing both. Just quickly, but maybe Mathilde can add on this, but this is obviously something we're doing first in INPA under the leadership of Commissioner Urpilainen. But this is certainly also something, as Mathilde was saying, that we're in touch with each ES, obviously within the House, but also informing member states about what we're doing. So, I mean, again, there was a question also from civil society already somehow wanting to jump the gun and say, well, you know, is everybody using your marker? Is the OECD, our member state? Okay, let's take it step by step. Let's already, with the limitations, but the ambition that we have, establish our benchmark in 2023 and then work on it, and obviously try to expand it with member states and others for sure. But I agree, the objective is certainly to see where we stand, us, and then obviously, as we already presented, try to also make sure that this is something that's used by others.
Indeed, and in fact, we are launching in April the global teamwork approach to inequality reduction with member states. So it's not an initiative, it's an approach. So it will be similar to a space of discussion, of dialogue. And one of the objectives of that is we're not only to discuss about the concepts and the challenges, well, they are very important, but also about the measurement and about the marker. So the objective of this global team-up approach will be very to try to present the marker, to see how it's possible for member states to apply it, if they want to apply it, because we have some different understanding and approach regarding inequality. So first to align approaches, to have the same definition and concept, and then to see if it's possible to apply the marker. So indeed, it will be a step-by-step process, a long process, but I think we'll all have the same objective at the end, to fight inequalities.
Just if I can add something, just to recognize also the role of AfD, because it was a partnership between European Commission and AfD in developing these tools. And actually the AfD provide also the programs to be scrutinized. And so there are already countries that are like involved in, actively, I say, involved in that and development cooperation. But well, sorry, what it was Chiara, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Said it was really, really important in my view, because that's, I mean, that's sometimes, you know, I work in development in the field for years. I was in the field too. So sometimes we forgot that actually the main reason of the creation of development cooperation is to actually develop country, but reducing poverty inequalities. That was what it was all about. So we are coming back to somewhat to basics. Of course, we are doing already, but that's, you know, I found a really extremely valuable move made by the Commission, because I mean, I'm internal, external. Since I work with the Commission, but an external one. So I have also other eyes to look at. Its Commission is always criticized for many things, especially for that. And I found extremely, extremely valuable the fact that they're now, you know, in the forefront of a very crucial fight, which is for inequality and social justice. By, of course, doing we can, because it's complicated, and I feel it's complicated. But it's extremely important that, you know, something is it's the tentative is on the table, and we are trying to do the best to make it applicable, simple, and you know, possibly to have an impact actually at the end. So
thank you very much, Christian, Mathilde, and Philippe for those points.
Yes, Mariana.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Is my camera not working? I think it is something problem. Anyway,
Shoot.
I would
Yes.
really like to hear the colleagues who gave their opinion about the usefulness of the marker in they work, where they quoted that it's moderately useful or less useful, because that I think there is a lot of messages there that we should look into to know and to learn and to be able to advance with the use of this marker and fighting inequalities. So that is a question to the participants who actually
Yes.
would really like to hear about that. I work in the headquarters, so I don't have the same kind of perspectives to the work that we do, as the colleagues do have in delegation. So would really like to hear about that. I can only maybe guess that there are some procedural issues that are also hampering the usefulness of the practical use of the marker. Because when we have a programming priorities set and annual action programs done, and it goes in a very, very short time frame, and it's difficult to look into all the aspects in a very short time. So maybe that's a question to you, Philippe, as you are the equality advisor for the INTPA. What plans are there to revise or instill more time for more quality programming and quality definition or a formulation of programs? Are there any plans for that? Discussion with Koons, with maybe giving more time for designing programs and so on.
Thanks, Mariana. I mean, in terms, and I see there's a hand also, because I agree with you. I mean, again, for today and now and this afternoon, I think it's mostly useful to hear also colleagues that can, tell us from delegations how we can help them further. And in terms of the timing, I think we are at least, I mean, I don't think there is, I take the point on the time needed, but at the same time, in terms of, let's say, procedures and structure, I think what we have here, what has been put in place with discussions at the SSC and so forth, and being flexible in terms of organizing those meetings where geographic colleagues are telling us they need to. I think the flexibility is there for you to use, or for geographic colleagues to come and say, by the way, I'm at this stage of the process and I would like to get a steer on, including not only 2023, as I said, right now in SSC terms, we've gone through all the AAPs. We're looking now, in the 2024 onwards, and we're looking at the midterm review exercise. So your point, for example, I would link it to the midterm review exercise that we will launch, and fair enough, where we will try to do it as early as possible so that the input that we're requesting from delegation is actually requested early on and with sufficient time. But let's say in terms of procedures, I'm pretty sure that would be Koen's reply also to this, is we have the structures in place here. So for me, it's not a question to add more or to change the procedure, it's to use what's in place in terms of our own steer and feedback that what we bring to management and what steer that we get. But I think that would be my point. And I don't think people are asking for more, certainly not asking for change in procedures. I think we have them. Let's try to improve, but and also use them in terms of time when we think it makes sense for you from a geographic perspective to get the feedback you need, and as early as possible. I see there's a hand raised. Please.
Yes,
Please go ahead.
this is Gael. Maybe also to echo what has been said already a bit. Can you hear me well? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I find it fairly refreshing at the time of global gateway, strategic autonomy, reorganizing supply chains, focusing on common interests with partner countries, realizing that we did not completely lose our development soul is fairly refreshing. So I guess we need to adapt to a changing world, but we should also keep in a corner of our head why we are doing this job.
No, I agree, but I don't think I agree. I don't think it was forgotten. And I think, and that's what we're trying to do. You can certainly, speak about strategic autonomy, ours, but also the countries we're talking about their own strategic autonomy and interests and values, and come together to discuss in partnership. And when we translate this into global gateway, as we said, whether it's digitalization, for example, Vestager was in Central America on connectivity issues. And again, I think also through those high-level political visits, make the link that this is not only about cables and connection, but the soft that goes around. And to some extent, this is where the EU has a specificity compared to other offers that are out there. And to link it, I agree with you, to link the internal and external, because I'm French. Steve, what's happening in France this week? When we talk about inequalities, this is something that cuts across rich and poor countries alike. And so to also be, let's say, credible in our engagement with third countries, we also need to look at what we're doing at home. And I think that's exactly what we're doing with Global Gateway. But again, very operationally, and thanks to the work and the effort, both at policy level, where this is a sensitive issue, but also not to do a tick the box exercise where it feels like Brussels is bugging colleagues in delegation saying, oh, you already have the gender, you need to add one box in the SSC. No, thanks for your commitment, because this is more than this. This is a key political issue, and again, this is complex, but that I think also allows us in Brussels, but in delegations, to connect the dots at policy level, at instrument level. You have the whole session. I could not listen to all of it on where Xavier was there on fiscal policies and budget support operations. It cuts across, and we have the tools also to act both at policy level and at operational level. And I think that contributes to what makes our European action at political and operational level specific and different from other offers out there, or other kind of partnerships that are promoted. So don't hesitate, shoot, because I mean, this is something that is being taken seriously at all levels. I mean, the SSC discussions, I mean, that comes up systematically. The QRM discussions, the follow-up discussions at action document level. Please, in whichever way you think we can help you, both at my level, at G4's level, please shoot and don't hesitate, because I think we are really making a difference in engaging in such an issue. So thanks to you too, on the ground.
Thank you.
Other colleagues, other questions? Did you miss something in the chat? Because we're not looking at it right now. If not, I think we will thank everyone for participation.
Super.
Huh? Very well. So we thank you all for your participation, for your interest in the in what we've been presenting in the inequality marker and how we can move forward with tackling the reduction of inequalities. We will reconvene in 35 minutes for this afternoon session, where we'll present the application of the marker in practice throughout the cycle. And your documentation, so to get very practical. Very well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.